everybody! Oh, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you all. I have to say, I'm sort of overwhelmed. This is the most. I was sort of wondering how I could even teach this class. Like, I just, I just not like this week. It just has felt. Um, it's been such a hard week, and I've been mostly in just a like a daze, and I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of teaching, a lot of stuff coming up. It's the new year. It's Parshat Bereishit, and I just felt like, how am I gonna how am I gonna how am I gonna talk about Bereishit? Um, like, how am I gonna talk about Adam and Eve with everything else that's going on? And I have to tell you, this is just seeing you all here is the most joy I felt all week. I feel so happy to be here. And I also, so I'm thankful to you all for being here. I'm thankful to you all. Yeah, this feels like really healing for me. And even before I saw your faces, I somewhere, in the fog of the week, I started to realize, no, of course I'm going to teach about Parshat Bereishit. Like, of course, this is what we have to do. This is who we are. You know. This is the text. This Torah has formed us as a people and has animated us and has given us life, for thousands of years, and it's always here. Like, no matter what's going on, it's always here, and I'm so grateful for that. All right, so let's learn some Torah. I have a lot of announcements. Before we begin, a lot of announcements. Welcome to my two communities, my IKAR community, where I started this class, and to my Hadar community. I work for Hadar now, and I want to share a little bit about that with you all. And this class is going to be a kind of a beautiful partnership between these two communities that I love so much, and beyond. Everyone is welcome to this class, and there's lots of folks who have come to this class regularly who've never been to either of those other communities at their home base, because we have this online space that we found during the pandemic, and that's when we started. And so anyway, I work for Hadar, and that's an organization based back in New York, a really incredible learning Jewish, like, it started as yeshiva and now just has all kinds of Jewish learning resources. And part of the reason that I work for them is because they are really, in many ways, a household, or Jewish household name in New York, or at least on the Upper West Side. I'm here to kind of bring Hadar out west. That's my new job. I'm the director of Hadar West Coast, and so I'm really excited to bring their Torah in all its forms to the kind of consciousness of those of us out here. Basof Ma'arav. As the famous poet Rabbi Halevi wrote, "Ani basof ma'arav." I'm here at the end of the West, out on the West Coast, and I'm not going to give you a whole lecture about what Hadar is right now, but I will. I'm just going to give you a bunch of links. How about that? Because that's what we do on Zoom. So let me just give you links to just give you a sense of what Hadar is about and how you can get connected if you're interested. And this is one just to sign up for our emails if you're out here on the West Coast and want to get West Coast specific events. And then especially like exciting and relevant for our classes that I also this beautiful space has been going now for 3 years, and we created this space in part because Parsha has always been my first love in the world of Torah, and this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be studying, and so I am especially excited that one of my roles at Hadar this year is going to be writing their weekly Devar Torah, their essay on the Parsha, which they have been doing for years. And really, I mean, you should go to their catalog of essays on the weekly Parsha. You just have some of the great luminaries of both of the Jewish world, of just some of the great teachers of the Jewish world. But this year I'm doing the weekly Parsha, and I should say that my colleague Rabbi Avi Strasberg is doing essays also on the holidays. So they're like, when you sign up, you get both of these things, and this is where you can sign up. And I already here we go. So you can sign up for the weekly essay here, and that essay will not cover the exact same material. These will be separate learning experiences, but I'm sure they will be connected. I'm going to be, like, this is hard. This is like a big labor at putting out these every weekend. So I'm going to be deep in the Parsha, and inevitably some of the stuff that I'm working through will, I imagine that this class will sometimes pick up on like footnote 7 and go, a deeper dive into some of the stuff that has already come out. This comes out every Tuesday. And in fact, the first one, because it is Parashat Bereishit, is already out. And let me give you a link to that here. I think this might be the last link. No, it's not. It's not. Lots of links coming your way today. But this is the first one, so you can take a look. And they send that out as an email. And there's a PDF, and there's a podcast version of it if you like to listen. That's on Hadar's podcast, which is called Tashma. So you can find that on Apple. And speaking of podcasts, I also want to say that we podcast this class, or an edited version of it, if you ever miss this class. And that podcast IKAR puts out, and Vera, who's running our chip as always. Hi, Vera. Love to Vera. Vera edits it down and puts it out. And that podcast is here. It's called Best Book Ever. And we're tomorrow we'll put out a version of this class. And then also what we started doing last year was using Best Book Ever as a space just to have conversations on certain issues or themes or topics in the Torah. With folks who might have particular insight into them. And I'm very excited that we're kicking off this year with a conversation with a dear friend and really one of my favorite musicians, Ezra Furman, with whom I am having a conversation around the topic of conflict in the Book of Numbers, which is really like the topic in the Book of Numbers. And Ezra is a musician who writes really conflict-oriented, loud punk protest music, and has, I think, real insight into what it means to kind of call out in protest. It was a really interesting conversation, and she's a very sensitive thinker and really like a deep Jew. I'm not just plucking musicians randomly. Like, this is someone who is both has an incredible musical life and also thinks deeply about Torah. So anyway, all of that is like, that's welcome back kind of to this space. And we won't do this much introduction in the future, but I'm just kind of getting reoriented here in my new life, and so grateful to have this connection to all of you, my not my old life, but my ongoing life, my ongoing community. This space, as you know, if you've been here before, you've heard me say, this is my place. This is my anchor in my week. And this is, I wondered how I would even get to, a teaching space this week, and now that I'm here, it feels like this is exactly where I need to be. So I'm grateful to you for helping me create this space. Let's get into it. Let's study some Torah. I'll say a blessing. This is a blessing that we say every morning, and often it covers us for the whole day. But I always say at the beginning of the class, just as a way of sanctifying the space, but also if you haven't said the blessing yet, then I have you in mind as I'm saying the blessing. Torah study is not just an intellectual pursuit; it is a sacred act in our tradition. So we make a blessing over it. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, let's begin. Parashat Bereishit. Let's begin. Okay, so Parashat Bereishit is magnificent. There's just nothing quite like the opening of the best book ever, and it is majestic, and it is cosmic, and it is it's everything. It's just all of the great human themes kind of teed off at once. And I must say, of course, that this week, as terrible and as horrifying as this week has been, as I said, I felt a little teaching about it, but there's Torah's Torah, and that's fine. But I couldn't help but look through this week's Parsha and just think about, is there anything here that speaks to this moment, to where I'm at right now this week, and in all the pain that I am in? And that is how I feel. I mean, I won't say too much more than that, but I realized, on about Tuesday, that what is that feeling? And I realized my chest had been in pain for 48 hours, just this kind of like hum of pain with me. And I think a lot of us have been feeling that this week. So with that in my mind, or really in my heart, I read through the Parsha, and there are all kinds of themes in the Parsha that this week's Parsha, that, I mean, the first murder is in this week's Parsha. We could look at that. But there's one line in particular that just really jumped out at me. Really, like, I saw it and I thought, oh, well, that's it. That's what the class will center around this week. And it is a line right towards the end, tucked away right at the end of the Parsha. The Parsha is the creation of the world, Adam and Eve, the eating of the fruit, the snake, the curses, then Cain and Abel, and then lineages, as we head towards the end of the Parsha. And right there at the end, let me give you this source sheet. We usually learn off a Safari source sheet, and I'm putting it in the chat for those who want to click it out and just save it or refer to it. But I always do a screen share, so we'll just learn from the screen. So you needn't worry. You don't have to have the text on hand. But this is the text, that the verse that really jumped out at me. So let's look here. Vayar Hashem ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aretz. The Eternal saw how great was human wickedness on earth. Ra'at ha'adam, human wickedness. Okay. And some of the commentators make clear that phrase, it's not just wickedness, it's the wickedness of humanity. Okay. The Eternal saw how great was human wickedness on earth, how every plan devised by the human heart was nothing but evil all the time. Now, that's a heavy phrase. I must say the translation here is beautiful, but let's just go to the Hebrew and make sure that we're catching all the words, because it's also loose. How every plan devised by the human heart was nothing but evil all the time. V'chol yetzer machshavot libo, all of the urges or inclinations of the thoughts of his heart. Now, some of you know we've discussed this before. Lev in ancient Hebrew is not just heart, in fact, it was translated as mind, and it's sometimes translated as mind, and it's both. It's the consciousness, the awareness, mind, heart. Okay, so I'm translating it as heart here, maybe because that's how I'm feeling today. But that's the word there, lev. Rak kol hayom. It was only bad all day long. Okay. And here's this verse in particular. This is where I really got caught up. V'yinachem Hashem ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz. And the Eternal regretted having made humankind on earth. This is the end of the first reading of the Torah. I just want to us to note the first reading of our sacred scripture, it ends, and one of the last things we read is that God is saying, I made a mistake. I should not have done this. I should not have created these people. I regret it. I reconsider. Okay, the word for reconsider and regret is vayinachem, right? And God regretted. Ki asa et adam, that God had made the person on the earth. And then this above all, this is really what I want to talk about with you today. V'yit'atzev el libo. And God was pained in the heart, in God's heart. Notice, by the way, that the word libo we had here and the word libo we have here. So it's like the heart of humanity, the heart of God. There's sort of kind of an echo there. Okay. And the Eternal said, I will blot out from the earth humankind whom I created. V'yomer Hashem, emche et adam asher barati me'al pnei adama, me'adam ad behema, ad remes, v'ad of hashamayim, ki nachamti ki asitim. And there's that word again. I regret that I made them. And this is the coming flood. This tees us up for next week. But here's what I want to do. I want to focus especially on this word, v'yit'atzev, etzev, which means pain, which means sorrow, which means grief, which means suffering, etzev, pain. Okay. Now, there's a lot to I did mostly just want to toss out the question, what does it mean for God to feel pain in God's heart? What is God experiencing? And we will do a little bit of teasing out of the word, as we often do in this class, and we'll consider, or we'll look at maybe some commentaries if we have occasion to. But let's just pause here before we do some of that connective work and just ask, what does it mean that God feels pain in God's heart? God regrets making human beings. That, at least on a surface level, I guess I understand. God made them, and now God says, oops, that was a mistake. Though we will soon ask that question too. What does it mean for God to regret? Okay, did God not know what God was doing? But fine, but let's just stay with the pain in God's heart. So how do you understand that? I didn't know God had a heart. We have hearts. We have minds. That's a people. That's an organ. That's us. What does it mean for God to feel pain? So let's open up. I see some of the usual suspects. My favorite people. The line of interpreters here. So let's start with Noah. Noah Pollock. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Rabbi, in these circumstances. And I feed in on one of the words you talked about, Vayinachem. In that sense, it's regret. I'm seeing that verb root. I'm seeing the comfort that Jeremiah is talking about in Parsha Nachamu. It's maybe the same or different verb root, but in that sense, maybe the divine was comforted that he had comfort and regret in the same sense. I'm comforted in your creation, and I'm also regretting it. Both also very heavy on Tisha B'Av. and very heavy right now because of all the destruction that's going on.
Okay, that's a great place to start. Just with the language of nechama, we say that word, and the first thing I hear is what Noah said: comfort, comfort, and that word nun chet mem, it does mean comfort, but it can also mean regret or reconsider, because it speaks to a feeling that something needs addressing, right? So when Isaiah says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort, comfort my people, what Isaiah is saying is attend to this, change this state of being, bring soothing to this state of pain, okay? And then and so Noah was like, I hear some comfort in this. Don't I hear some comfort in this? Even though the way it's being used in context is clearly about regret, it doesn't feel like God is going to offer comfort at all. Now, I have a certain way that I think of laying out the texts in these classes, but usually when I see someone grab onto something that I was saving for later, I try not to hide the ball. Okay, so if Noah identifies something that really is a connection that we should speak all the way out now, I think it's worth looking at another text that we were going to see later that will kind of clarify what I've just been saying. The sort of the double meaning of the root nun chet mem, necham or nechama, and this is a remarkable parallel that we're going to take a look at some other instances of pain, but let's scroll down here to Genesis 5, which came just a little bit earlier. Where are we now? Genesis 6. Genesis 5 has this line. Noah is the star of next week's part, not Noah Pollock, but Noah and the Ark is the star of next week's Parsha, and he appears at the first time in this week's Parsha in that genealogy, and his father Lamech has Noah and names Noah, and this is the verse that names Noah, and as a matter of fact, I mentioned, I'm putting out these weekly essays. You'll see, if you read next week's, you'll see I'm talking about this interesting parallel that a lot of the commentators point out, and especially Umberto Cassuto, who was a 20th century biblical scholar, points out that there's not just a parallel, but three parallels here. So take a look at this. Noah's father named him Noah, V'yikrat shmo Noach, lemor ze yenachamenu. This one will provide us relief. In other words, comfort us. Mimasenu, from our work, umiitzvon yadenu, and from the pain of our labors. There's that word again. So Noah is supposed to provide comfort or relief from pain, and the pain of our labors, the labors out of the soil that God cursed. All right, that's after the eating of the fruit. God curses the snake, the woman, the man, and the soil itself. And okay, let's just stop there. We won't get too far off on a tangent, but just take a look at this verse and its words: relief, work or making, and pain. And now we'll scroll back up. Cassuto points this out, and it's remarkable. Look at these same three words. V'yinachem Hashem ki asa. Now it's not relief, but regret. Okay, and again, those words are related because they both speak to addressing some state of being that needs changing. Ki asa, because God made, just like our labors, God's labors made the person on the earth. v'yitatzev, and God was pained. So there is some kind of irony here where Noah was supposed to bring all of this comfort from pain, but instead, God is not going to relieve their pain. And in fact, God feels pain. And so the comfort's not coming. Instead, the flood is coming. Okay. So Noah Pollock kind of got that thread out for us. Okay. So let's keep going.
And a quick thing also being a Noah, that being my Hebrew name, Mitat said also root I'm finding for apology.
Okay, that's exactly what I wrote about. So you'll see this Tuesday is your name and the naming of Noah. And there's a lot more to say about that verse, but let's just leave that particular scene aside. What's useful to us is that we have now pain that human beings experience from their labor in the ground and some hope for comfort, and instead comfort's not coming because what God feels instead is regret, because God feels pain in God's own heart. And again, what does that mean, God feels pain? So when you ask a question like this, like what is the meaning of a word like divine, a phrase like divine pain, the person that you want on deck to answer that question is Florine Rosen, our poet in residence here. So I'm really excited to turn to Florine for her interpretation.
I don't usually personify God, but I will in my answer, and it's a dichotomous answer. If God is the creator, and in particular creation with the word, God is an artist, a creator, who all artists, whether they be writers or painters, we're all vulnerable. We all put ourselves out there. So therefore we will feel pain. I mean, it's going to happen. And we have to process how we're going to deal with that pain. But any creative person will feel pain. And the second thing, the reverse.
Nope. I think Florine just maybe fell off the Zoom because she just disappeared from the screen. But I mean, she's already given us such riches. So I'm sure she'll come back. But let's just ponder for a moment the massive idea that Florine puts on the table, that God is a creator, God is an artist, as Florine put it, and so God is creating, and when we create, we're vulnerable. What do you think of what I made? How did it work out? Did you like my class? Did you like my essay? Did you like the painting did you like the sculpture? Do you like these people? But God is in dialogue with God's self, right? So it's there's a pain here of it sounds like condemnation. Look at how evil people are, but it's actually a reflection on God's own work. I made these people and it didn't work, and that's painful. I expected so much more from the work of my hands, and it's painful, right? Okay. Leah Matsui, our friend from Japan.
Yeah. We have bookends. The beginning, we have Tov. We don't have a dispassionate God. We have one that says, oh, this is good. And then here we have it bringing the book to the close. Oh no, this is not good. Mm-hmm. So if we are as readers, as experiencers, set up to know that it's a God that can say Tov and feel Tov, good, this is good, then it's no surprise that God can have the opposite. No, this is not good. This is not working. I'm so sorry I ever got into this.
Yeah, there's something just wild about the parallel. You're right, but it's a wild thought that there's a parallel between our ability to identify good and bad and joy and pain, because after all, I think of those as human categories. Like we eat the fruit and then we see tov v'ra, right? Isn't God above all that? But no, God is naming things as good from the start. Now God is naming things as bad. And after all, God has a heart, right? So there's a lot of the commentaries ask the same question we're asking. What does it mean for God to regret? What does it mean for God to feel? And what they say is that God is speaking to us as if God were one of us, putting God's self into human language. So we sometimes speak of ourselves as being created in the divine image. I mean, sometimes speak of. That's in the Torah. That's in this week's Parsha. We often reflect on our Tselem Elohim, our being made in the image of God. But there is this way in which verses like these, some of the commentators suggest, are almost like God presenting God's self in our image. Like, do you know, let's assume that God is transcendent. Then it's God saying, you know, you have to imagine what it would be like for me if I could feel like you and watch what you do. And it pains me. It pains me because I am your creator. I am your parent. Now, let me just pause here for a second and ask a question. We've got lots of people on deck here, and I'd like to hear from as many of them as possible. But we're talking about pain and we're talking about regret. We haven't really named what it is. Why is God so upset? It's not the eating of the fruit, because that God already dealt with, right? Maybe it's the killing of Abel, but again, God already dealt with that. So maybe it's like one thing after another, but we have those stories in the background. But right here in context, I think it is worth just considering a couple of things that are happening right in this locale. What is God so upset about right now? Let me just name these things, and then I'll continue back to folks who are trying to make sense of this. But if I go, and Safaria is very helpful this way, like here I've extracted these verses where God is suddenly upset. God saw how great was human wicked. What did God see? So let's go in, we'll click in, and we'll take a look at what God saw. Can everybody see this new screen? Yeah, okay. The screen sharing is sometimes funny. Okay, so God saw how great was human wickedness on earth. Now, the last thing that we read about, and this is complicated because it doesn't even seem, it's not exactly about when humankind began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them. Nobody really, here, this should be in Hebrew as well. Nobody really understands what these things are. Bnei ha-Elohim, the children of the gods. Are these powerful people? Is this some like mythology that's been snuck in here? Are these divine beings? You can see that's the way they're translating them here. That makes this a very confusing passage to interpret, and we're not going to go there today. But what we are going to note is that they took wives from among those who delighted them, right? And that is repeated again, that the Nephilim, again, is another name for what these creatures might be. They appeared on earth. Are they just a powerful people, or are they divine beings? But again, they took these women. Okay. So that there is a feeling of, or an echo of sexual conquest and rape here. Like it's not exactly clear what's going on here, but it doesn't seem consensual. So that is the last thing we read before this. And then I will just, and God saw how great human wickedness was on earth. Now, again, it's a little tricky because wasn't it these divine beings that were being wicked? But okay, the last thing we read about is some kind of sexual oppression, assault. And then if we go into Parshat Noach, because this is really just like the end of the Parsha, we go into Parshat Noach, we see what God is upset about again. V'tishachet ha'aretz lifnei Elohim, v'timalei ha'aretz chamas. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. Hamas, a word that has like a kind of like chilling irony. It means something else in that organization's, but it seems no coincidence. But in ancient Hebrew, the word Hamas means violence or lawlessness. Okay, so that's just an attempt to give some reasoning to what is God so upset about. Maybe what God is upset about is the way God's creatures are treating each other, raping each other, killing each other, stealing from each other, right? That seems on some level the pshat. That's what God is so angry about, is not why didn't you keep kosher? Why did you eat from the fruit of the tree? That's an assault against God, and God curses them, and there's punishment for that. But what God cannot tolerate is the way we are to one another. Okay, so that's just for some context here there in the verses. All right, let's keep hearing from a few more folks before we do a little more connecting work in our Parsha. Ariella, nice to see you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Great to be back learning with you. To me, it's when God created us, and God created us in his image, and then he's watching how humanity is unfolding and how we're treating each other. It's painful, and it's like God cares so much about us. It pains him to see that.
Okay, good. The way you just put it, Ariella, is like we started to go here before, but it's like God is upset to see us behave this way because we are created in God's image. And so the way you put it, Ariella, it's not just that we've betrayed that image, but is there something about what we're doing that reflects badly on God? God has a heart. We have a heart. Our heart is filled with wickedness. What is that? Where do we get our heart? Where do we get our heart? And there's a strange irony hovering over this moment. Like, what do you mean you're going to kill these people? You did this. We didn't form ourselves to be wicked, all day long. You made us this way. So what's your solution? To kill us? Okay, so this is like very, very difficult stuff. This is very difficult stuff. Okay, Ari.
I'm very struck that the emotion God gives is regret. It's inward focused. It's not anger. It's not outward focused. He has regret. And I'm also struck, there's another parallel they keep playing with Adam and Adam, earth and man, right? And because it's regret, to me, it seems like it's not just that because we know the story also, but that interplay between he's bringing back to the earth that which he brought out of the earth. It's not that just he's about to blot them out, he's about to recreate it, right? It's not that they messed up, although they did with wickedness, it's that he messed up and he has to redo his creation. It's like an eraser that he's going to take to this in a way. And I just, it's like an admission of God's fault in the creation, but also kind of like, it's not a pure hopelessness, it's an anger. It's like, I get a redo, or I can do this better, or, something that I actually find kind of, there's a weird bookend, almost Hollywood-like he creates and now he's about to, suck everything back in, and then he's about to create again because he messed up the first time.
Right. The language here, and I think you used it. The language here is, where are we? Here we are. The language is emche, which was the word we use for erasing. Blot out, I think they have it here. I will blot out, to erase. So there's a feeling there of like, oh, like, let me just, that was a mistake, let me start over again. And there's a kind of like, and that's exactly what Parshat Noach will be. So is there some what's the word? Some hope that God retains for our humanity, the future, a new start, God's own ability to get this right. And, you know, a lot of those hopes are placed on Noah, right? Noah is the one person who will be spared this erasing, right? But, and, you know, water erases, like there's a, like that language is appropriate for the coming disaster here. Okay, Jonathan.
I really want to thank you for starters, for picking this very timely topic in this very difficult time, but also for taking this angle of exploring sadness as a divine attribute. And one of the things that it makes me think about is how much we fuse with sadness and how hard it is to let go of sadness, how much of a process that is. It's not just capital G God who has sadness. I mean, one of the words used in Torah for idols, for false gods, is atzabim. And when Rachel leaves her father, when she leaves Laban's house, she can't bear to leave behind the atzabim. She takes them with her, which I think we all kind of do, right? We don't eat, we don't sleep. Maybe sometimes we think we don't deserve to eat. We don't see clearly when we're sad. It's kind of comforting to know that God doesn't see clearly when God is sad either. It's also comforting to know that that's not a permanent state, to the extent that any of this makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That reflection, the sort of I love the way you put it, Jonathan, that there's a kind of a lingering pain. The pain stays with us. And we know that feeling. And so maybe there's a comfort in knowing that God could also ache and feel pain, even though in this case it's going to like come, you know, blow back out at us. But there's some comfort in that. So I want to, in thinking here about ongoing aching pain that stays, I want to take this moment as we come now to the last kind of quarter of our hour. I want to make sure that we draw some of the connections to you know, I'm writing these weekly essays on the Parsha for Hadar, and my focus, and you'll not be surprised if you've learned with me before, my focus is on the language of the Torah, and in particular the incredible artistry of the Torah. That we are so used to reading this book that like it's just like we don't even think about it as a composed work. But it's not a coincidence that this book lasted. It has a kind of grandeur of artistry that is, well, it's unparalleled. And so I'm going to be trying to highlight that in these weekly Divrei Torah. And I want to consider this concept of pain, and as Jonathan put it, the kind of enduring pain that stays with us, by going back and looking at some of Parshat Bereishit's artistry, because this appearance of this word, now you saw there was another one, but actually there are 4 appearances of the word pain. Actually, I guess 4 verses, 5 instances of the word for pain, etzev, in Parshat Bereishit. So pain is primordial. It is something that exists from the start. But who is the first to be named as experiencing pain? Do you know? Eve. And it comes Eve and then Adam, but Eve first. It comes in the curses after they've eaten from the fruit. And the curses contain all kinds of terrible things. I like to remind myself they are curses, right? So, you know, this is not an ideal state of being. This is This is a a fall, to borrow from another tradition. So let's take a look at the first appearance of pain in the Torah, and it's both surprising and not surprising, because the context is pregnancy. To the woman, God said, Elisha Amar, harba arbe itzbonech veheronech be'etziv teldi vanim. To the woman, God said, I will greatly increase your pain in labor. In pain shall you bear children. There's that word, pain. This is the only time that it's used in the Torah in isolation here. In pain. In pain. In pain shall you bear children. And, it's not surprising because, women who give birth do go through tremendous pain. That this is in some ways, I think, an anthropological kind of approach would just say, oh, this is a way of explaining, the pain of labor. Why is labor painful? But as the Torah lays it out or imagines it, it is as if that wouldn't have been the case, that you see sometimes in these animal documentaries that the baby just sort of drops out, right? But our species births in great pain. It is called labor for a reason, and there's pain associated with that. And since I'm here, and just to make sure that we cover our ground, let's also take a look at the pain that Adam experiences. So this is Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. And here's chapter 3, verse 17. And to Adam, God said, because you did as your wife said and ate of the tree which I commanded you. And I know there's all kinds of very charged gender dynamics here that we'll deal with another time. Whose fault is it? About, and all that. But because you did this and I told you not to eat from it, cursed be the ground because of you. There's that curse that we talked about earlier. In pain shall you eat of it. In pain shall you eat of it all the days of your life. And then that's what Noah's father is trying to provide relief from, is that pain. There's a connection here, right? Itzavon. And itzbonech. So when we think about what is the quality, where do we see this pain in our own lives? This week it's not hard to find. But in the everyday, the sort of the pain that is with us in a kind of enduring way, the pain of labor, but I think also the pain of bringing children into the world. The whole yes, the physical pain that women go through in birthing, but also the whole process of we talked about God bringing us into the world, bringing children into the world, the pain of that, the vulnerability of that, to use Florine's language, right? And the pain of laboring on the ground, trying to eke out our survival from this ground which has been cursed not to give forth. And this is like our ground is the Middle East, the land of Israel. That's not a ground that gives forth produce easily. You have to work for it. You have to cultivate the land. That's so okay. So you see here now a kind of thread: Eve's pain, Adam's pain, Noah's father's pain, and then God's pain. And so I'm going to turn back to you, but I want you to be I'd like to hear some attempt at making those connections. What does it mean that God feels pain when the first pain there ever was the pain that the first woman felt, right? The first, or maybe the first couple felt. The first pain that was ever named was our human pain, and then God feels it. Okay. All right. So let me turn back to the folks with their hands. Payam. Imrani, I can't hear you. You seem unmuted, but I can't hear you. Try one more time. No, okay. I can't hear you now. I'm going to turn to the next person. If you can figure it out, I'll come back to you.
Can you hear me?
Rena. Oh, now okay. So Payam first.
God created man to find out who God is. A singular entity doesn't have self-consciousness. So when he sees wickedness in man, he realizes there's wickedness in him, and that is his pain. That's why his heart hurts. And the question then becomes, what is the wickedness? And it's when we think of ourselves as a certain type of person, and then we see ourselves through the eyes of others, and we realize, oh, that image of ourselves we had, I'm not that person. So that's what the wickedness is.
Okay. All right. So we sort of like there, we've kind of teased towards this this idea before, but Payam really gives it full articulation. Imagine that part of what we are supposed to understand from Parshat Bereishit, from the creation story, is that God engages in creation. God creates us in order to become conscious of God's self, God's own self. That there's something about creating a being in God's own image, just as there is in our lives when we create children in our image. That teaches us something about ourselves, for good and for bad. We see the beautiful parts of ourselves in our children, and we also stop doing that. How you've disappointed me. You're so wicked all the time. It seems like God is talking about children, but in doing so, we understand. Right, because this is at a certain point we have to forgive our kids because they're kids, and this is the way it is. And I was a kid, and I get it. And are we supposed to understand? Payam gave it kind of a great theological framework there, but are we supposed to understand in a sort of storytelling way that this is the story of God trying to figure out something, to understand pain through seeing our pain, through feeling pain for us, the pain of disappointment, the pain of regret, the pain of loss. Is God understanding that through us? Right? Is that part of what the whole creation was for? Is God coming to understand, us and so understand what God made, right? And here I must mention one final verse before we take some last thoughts, because there is, for all of this tragedy, there is a kind of amends that is made, not this week, but in next week's Parsha, and maybe we'll take our final minutes to contemplate it. In next week's Parsha, God does blot out all living things except for Noah and the animals that Noah saves. And then after the flood, I think isn't that a great Neil Young album? Or that's after the gold rush. After the flood, God says this: Vayarach Hashem et reach hanichoach, vayomer Hashem al libo. The Eternal smelled the pleasing odor that Noah had offered up and resolved. Now, this is not a good translation, and not resolved, but said to God's heart. Okay, there's that word again, libo. Lo osif likalel od et hadama bavur ha'adam. I will never again doom the earth because of humankind. And here's this same language again. Remember what we started with? The human heart was nothing but evil all the time. So take a look at this sort of resolution. I realize now, ki yetzer lev adam ra min na'urav, that the devisings of the human heart are wicked from youth. V'lo osif od lahakot et kol chai kasher asiti. And I'll never again destroy every living being as I have done. From youth. Now, initially what God said was that they're just evil all the time. What's going on with them? But eventually God realizes they have a wickedness in them from their earliest. And kids do. And they take things and they hit each other. And that's not their fault. That's the way they are. And God's responsible for that. God created them. And so God says, okay, you know what? I think I get it. This is something that we are inevitably, by our makeup, we're just going to have to deal with. This is a part of who we are. And we need God's mercy. We need God to understand and to provide comfort. We're not capable of being all good. There is good in us, but we are struggling with wickedness. So I'm sorry to leave so many hands in the air, but I want to end with just a prayer that God end our pain and the pain inflicted upon us and the pain that God placed in us. A prayer that God end the wickedness that we create and the wickedness that we can't help. May God have mercy on us. I will see you next week. I'm excited to be with you, and I look forward to a year of learning together. Love you all, and stay safe and stay strong.